What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with some Destiny 2 news and updates. Of course, Renegades drops next week, so this week we get, well, it's kind of the third big set of reveals for Renegades, where we're going to see much more detail about the new content, activities and stuff. I will be keeping you posted with all of that. Additionally though, PlayStation managed to leak some new Trials armor that we're going to be getting, so we'll touch on that and some other trailer bits which have come out. Bungie have additionally outlined a series of ability tuning changes coming in Renegades, so we'll talk about those briefly, and of course, today is the conclusion of Call to Arms. There's an indication that some of the benefits for the event will continue through the next week, so we'll talk about what that means as well. If you guys enjoyed the video, a rating very much helps us out, but now let's get into it. And just a few hours ago, we got another bit of a leak, I guess, from PlayStation this time, who went live with the Renegades reveal. So they were actually live streaming. I'm guessing it was just a test or maybe an accident, but the background for it, anyway, was simply an image of Trials of Osiris. So this is actually showing off some new armor and I believe a new weapon there. It would appear that Bungie are renaming Trials as Pimps of Osiris, which of course isn't true, but what's going on with that jacket, man? It actually seems to be a theme running across the three characters, with the kind of leopard print stuff going on, and the fluffy lined hoods. Additionally, there's some cool glows and ornamentation, including on the weapons, so obviously this will be coming in the next season. Give me your thoughts about that down below. This does follow Bungie revealing some other new armor this week, which is Cabal themed, and yes, it is quite reminiscent of the Season of the Risen armor, but this is indeed a different set, which we can assume will drop in Eververse for this upcoming season. Otherwise, the only other tip-off we got early was from a teaser trailer for Renegades showing some of the cinematic footage, which will obviously be part of the launch trailer for the expansion. And of course, we're going to get that today, so Bungie will be live streaming at 10 AM Pacific. But what they say is a first look at the Renegades launch trailer, as well as the next Vidoc, and a deep dive into the Lawless Frontier activity with the dev team. As always, I will keep you posted with that to round up all of the news and stuff. Another quick mention, but Bungie teased that there'll be a Black Friday store sale, so as we can see, it does feature some retired rewards and a flat shipping rate for all items, plus a new emblem. So if you want to find out more details about that, the Bungie store is linked down below. For this week's reset, of course, we'll see the conclusion of the scoring part of Call to Arms. Now, Call to Arms appears to be split into two different sections, I guess. So, at reset for the 25th of November, scoring will stop. So, whatever scores you've achieved will lock in completely, and we should be granted the rewards from the chest to the right of dev rooms. So, that's the first part, and I'll let you know how that all works out at reset, but this will be part of something called Celebration Week, which I believe is basically the continuation of Call to Arms in terms of the reward bonuses. Hopefully, we'll still get daily free loot from the chest, but otherwise the scoring part will conclude. So we can see here, speak to Devrim to learn about the remaining benefits of Celebration Week, which I assume will be the stuff that we just mentioned. Otherwise, moving on here, Bungie have given us a preview of the ability tuning changes that are coming in the patch alongside Renegades next week. So for a quick rundown here, for Gunslingers and the Deadshot and 6-shooter super, they've increased damage against non-boss combatants by 15% and increased damage against bosses by 26%, so that's good. Also, Golden Gun projectiles now scorch targets, which will be 40 stacks at base and plus 10 with increased stacks fragment. Additionally, when fired inside a Well of Radiance, Golden Gun now counts as Radiant for increased damage. So those are some pretty good changes. Otherwise, Blade Barrage sees increased damage against enemies by 39%, and for Proximity Explosive Knife, Weighted Knife, Lightweight, and Trick Knife, or Knife Trick, they've increased damage against Red Bar enemies by 50%, damage against other enemies by 36%, and for Lightweight Knife, they've increased the crit multiplier from 1.3 to 1.5. Otherwise, on Acrobat's Dodge, they've increased the passage energy regen rate by 112% in PvE, so that will now match Gambler's Dodge. And for Gunpowder Gamble, shooting the dynamite in midair now increases damage by 50%, as well as expanding the radius and create sub-munitions. So Gunslinger doing pretty well out of those. Otherwise for Hunters, for Shadow Shot Deadfall, Tether Source now attaches to combatants on direct impact. Also, they've increased the weaken effect from 30 to 35%, which makes it the strongest weaken in the game. Otherwise, for Mobius Quiver, while the super is active, dealing damage now increases the power of subsequent Shadow Shot attacks and bow weapons. And it puts a bar on your screen that charges as you deal damage. Then when charged, the final shot deals significantly increased damage, turning it into one of the highest damage supers in the game. So that's kind of unexpected, but again sounds pretty good. They've also increased the base super duration from 10 seconds to 16 seconds, and with Orpheus Rig, it goes from 16 to 20 seconds. For the smoke bomb melee though, they've increased the projectile lifetime after sticking to a surface from 3 seconds to 9 seconds. They've also reduced the lingering smoke time in PvP, which goes from 5 to 2 seconds. On top of that, they reduced the screen effect intensity and duration while in enemy smoke, and they reduced the damage against players by 16%. So much stronger in PvE, less so in PvP. Getting on to Arc Strider though, for Storm's Edge, the passive energy regeneration is increased to 25%, and on Tempest Strike they've reduced the damage against players by 16%, so a bit of a nerf there for PvP again. On Stasis though, for Shatter Dive, shattering stasis crystals or enemies now grants Frost Armor, and any shatter grants full stacks in PvE and 2 stacks in PvP. Finally though, for Silence and Squall, they've increased damage against enemies by 63%, so quite a big change on that front as well. And for the last couple of Hunter changes, for Threadrunner, the Widow's Silk aspect allows looking at a grapple tangle for a short time to override your grenade ability with a free non-offensive grapple. And that allows you to give grapple abilities to fellow guardians who don't have Strand equipped, so that's interesting, and it works with Navigator as well. Additionally, grapple tangles created near the ground now rise into the air shortly after creation, and the base lifetime of them is increased to 20 seconds. Also, hitting an enemy with a grapple melee that wasn't free now creates a grapple tangle. But for the Silk Strike Super, they've increased passive energy regen by 11% and increased damage resistance during the super by 13%. Then across the board for Marksman's Dodge, they've increased the ammo pickup radius from 10 to 15 meters, and for Gambler's Dodge, in PvP only, they've reduced the melee energy gain from 50 to 35%. So those are our Hunter changes. Give us your thoughts below. Some of them actually sound pretty strong. Onto Dawnblade though for Warlocks. They've increased damage against combatants by 20%, that's on Daybreak, and projectiles now scorch enemies by default. For Voidwalker and Nova Warp, charging the primary attack now pulls enemies towards the Warlock, and they've increased the primary attack damage against combatants by 15%, plus Dark Blink now releases weakening Seekers. For the Vortex Nova Bomb though, it now repeatedly pulls enemies towards it during its lifetime. And onto Arc Stormcaller, for the Stormtrance Super, they've increased the maximum sustained damage bonus from 50% to 65%. They've also increased landfall jolt duration from 10 to 16 seconds. Plus on Chaos Reach, damage against combatants is increased by 20%, and on Ionic Sentry, the aspect, it no longer blinds the user on creation, which is nice. Otherwise, for Lightning Surge, they've reduced the damage against players by 16%. For the Stasis Shadebinder though, on Winter's Wrath, they've increased Shadow Wave damage against frozen targets by 210%, so that's going to be really good. And on Frost Pulse, they've reduced player freeze radius from 7.5 to 5 meters. It also now slows players between 5 and 8 meters. Then for Strand Broodweaver, for Needlestorm, the Needles now prioritise bosses, mini-bosses, and champions over other enemies. And across the board for Warlocks, Healing and Empowering Rifts can now be cast while moving at roughly half speed. That's interesting. They've also increased the rift radius from 3.75 meters to 5. And on Empowering Rift, they've increased melee and grenade recharge rate while standing in Empowering Rift by 20%. Then for Healing Rift in PvP, they have reduced the healing rate by 10%. So give me your thoughts on the Warlock changes, but finally for Titans, on Sunbreaker, the Hammer Throw melee impact damage now increases with range, so the base damage is unchanged, but the damage increase is purely additive. Otherwise, on Void Sentinel, for the shield, standing behind the shield now periodically reloads all weapons every 2.5 seconds. It also grants overshield to allies behind the shield, and the damage bonus while behind the shield is reduced from 40% to 25%. So I guess that offsets some of the other benefits. It'll be interesting to see whether more players start using it, but blocking attacks now extend super lifetime, and blocking attacks and protecting allies now charges shield throw damage. So those are pretty interesting. For Arc Striker though, light attacks with Fist of Havoc now increase the next heavy attack's damage. On Stasis Behemoth, Howl of the Storm, when used during a super, will increase super energy cost from 5% to 15%. And on Strand Berserker, for Banner of War, melee damage bonus against players now scales and stacks instead of always being at full strength. They also say the unarmed melee can now one-shot players with 2 stacks at 200 melee stat or at 3 stacks with the base stat, so that'll be quite strong. And noticeably there, while there have been a couple of minor nerfs, I suppose, to offset some of the other benefits that have been introduced, the very vast majority of all of that stuff is buffs, right? Which is pretty good. So overall, looking at that, the exotic changes Bungie announced last week, some of the weapon tuning, and of course the new introductions for Renegades, we appear to mostly be getting stronger, which is good. Plus Bungie have said there'll be more ability tuning in Shadow and Order, which I think comes in March 2026, so that is the mid-season update, the major update, just ahead of the spring next year. So there we go. I'll keep you posted today with Reset, the Renegades reveals, and the rest of the news through the week. We should be getting an artifact preview tomorrow after the main kind of live stream, as well as some additional gameplay of Renegades. So I'll keep you up to date. If you've enjoyed the video, a rating below very much helps us out. But otherwise, cheers for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.